emergencies. Ed's an attorney and is a frequent lecturer on emergency management issues, especially constitutional and legal aspects of floodplain regulations. Ed has received numerous national and international awards, including the nation's highest award for floodplain management, the Goddard White Award from the Association of Floodplain Managers. So we're very pleased to have Ed presenting today. Ed, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you very much. And I am Sean. Here we go. I'm sorry. Here we go. Sorry, this is just going to take a second, folks. Can everybody see my the stuff there?
Yes.
That's on the screen. Okay.
Yes.
Hey, hi everybody. This is a very exciting webinar. I really appreciate my friends from around the country and folks that aren't our friends yet. Kudos to the Georgia Association of Floodplain Managers for doing this. This isn't, of course, legal advice, but this is a pro bono presentation on behalf of the Natural Hazard Mitigation Association and the Association of State Floodplain Managers No Adverse Impact Committee. I really want to thank and kudos to Terry Turner, Tom McDonald, Sean, Nathan Shields, who requested this and conceived of this webcast. Thanks to Michael Baker for the use of its webcast facilities. Hi to everybody around the country, and a special thanks to Dr. Kelly Klima for some really fabulous ideas, and also to Don Watson for some great stuff, and we'll be talking about that. First, I want to just briefly mention the Natural Hazard Mitigation Association was created to bring together people around the nation working in the field of hazard mitigation, climate change adaptation, whatever you want to call loss reduction. Lots of different planners and disciplines. Yes.
Ed, let me butt in for just 1 second.
Sure.
I had 2 quick announcements. Please put your phones on mute if you're not speaking, and that's pretty much everyone. We're hearing some background noise, and we can't hear the speaker. Also, throughout Ed's presentation, if you get another call, please don't put us on hold because we'll hear your music instead of Ed's presentation. Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sean. Lots of different professions involved in this, and I regard NHMA as the all-hazards sister of the Association of State Floodplain Managers. I want to do a quick introduction and talk about some fundamental principles. Hazard mitigation is, look, it's just plain common sense. It's not a luxury. It's an insurance policy in a more disaster-prone world. The former UN Undersecretary for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief described what we're trying to do as the smartest, most cost-effective investment we can make in our common future. Calculating the benefits not just in dollars, saved lives, and also reduction of misery and prevention of environmental desolation. Those are my additions. But I want to start, I wish I could see you all and ask you, what is the best form of disaster relief? I believe, very simply put, the best form of disaster relief is no disaster relief. No disaster relief because we have designed our nation safely and properly. This webcast is not any sort of comprehensive attempt to talk about climate change adaptation for the current state of our planet's weather or for future natural hazards. We've done presentations like that in the past, and there's a fantastic presentation online that I particularly want to commend to your attention. Some of you were present in Georgia at the really excellent conference that we did within a conference on no adverse impact. We did a wonderful show on total no adverse impact water resources management. Others of you may have been at some of the ASFPM conferences where we've done this with folks like Bill DeGroat, Fernando Pascal from Baker, John Cussler, and others. This particular presentation by noted architect Don Watson is online. Here's the web address. It is an extraordinary, exceptional presentation on an extraordinary book we're going to be talking about. This webcast also is not the usual stuff that you've heard from me. So many of you have heard from me on the legal aspects of hazard mitigation and floodplain management. the NAI legal issues, the stuff that we've done at universities around the country, briefings for senior officials, stuff for water law conferences. What this webcast is an attempt to bring some common sense and the principles of emergency management to a very difficult, highly politically charged discussion of climate change. In order to do this, we really need to think very broadly about some serious problems, including the reality of sea level rise. That's not a theory. That's been going on this planet for literally thousands of years. We need to think of climate variability, uncertainty in our prognostications, and we need to also talk about climate change. To do this, we need to stop making things worse. Right now, around this nation, every single working day, a developer or a local government or a local official or a homeowner is doing something that is making the toll of disasters worse at some future time. We are continuing to dig ourselves deeper and deeper into worse disasters, as we shall see. We need to work across the board with a lot of different people and groups looking at the potential for disasters, looking at our need to protect our precious water resources, looking at a lot of issues. And the system we have, gosh, it's working against us. We have a system that rewards dangerous and irresponsible behavior and externalizes those costs to the public. Yet some places, like the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and other locations, we have heroes and heroines working to overcome these obstacles. So what's going on? Why is it so difficult to talk about climate change? Well, I think the first part of that is it's confusing. There are scientists, reputable scientists, disagreeing about this. I just saw this in an article in the New York Times yesterday. We've got one scientist that says, hey, look, the Earth's getting hotter and global warming's at work. And somebody else says, no, the study exaggerates this, and it's hard to nail down any specific storm as being due to climate change. The other reason, and we've got to be clear on this, folks, is that there are a lot of people who know exactly what climate change is. There is no doubt in their mind about it. They think it is a vast left-wing conspiracy involving government attempts to seize private property through the United Nations and destroy the America's private enterprise system and eventually destroy the United States. That's what they believe. And many of these folks are in a position of power to influence community development decisions. So my social scientist friends say, well, when you want to discuss a problem, start with some facts. So let's do some facts. First one, many of you have heard this from me before. Does nature cause disasters? No. Gilbert White, the great late Gilbert White, said it, I think, beautifully. Floods are acts of nature, but flood losses are largely acts of man. Natural disasters are generally not natural. Instead, I believe, and I believe this very strongly, that the blame needs to be put on human engineering, architecture, and construction, building improperly in places where natural processes, not just floods, tsunamis, tornadoes, floods, hurricanes, wildfires will foreseeably take place. As Pogo said, we have met the enemy, and he is us. Another fact I like to bring to people's attention is, hey, who's responsible for the safety and security of your family, your home, your community, your business? Is it some outside force, or is it you? Another fact is, it is just so that wind, flood, earthquake, and wildfires losses are increasing dramatically. Demographic trends indicate we're going to have more and more people in areas that are subject to natural events. Even more challenges from sea level rise, which I said has been going on for literally thousands of years. Even more challenges from climate change. Climate has always been changing on this planet. Variability and uncertainty in flood elevations. ASFPM has put together this chart that shows in constant $1999, we've seen a 250% increase in dollar per capita damages around our nation. This is happening throughout the world. This is just numbers from a reputable source, the Munich Reinsurance Company. They don't make this stuff up. Losses are increasing. Yet, when we think of climate change or variability, we need to recognize that if climate did something that has never done on this planet, if it stopped changing, we still have millions of people at risk and billions of dollars in potential damages. Dr. Roger Pilkey Jr. did research where he simply, or I wouldn't say simply, I shouldn't say that, where he, through a very complex process of research, imposed the flood heights from historic storm events on today's land use. And you can see on this slide that there's billions of dollars in damage from hurricanes just based on historic events. Think about coastal development. Last time Miami Beach got really nailed by a hurricane was 1926. And you look on that slide today, think of those millions of people at risk in high-rises who will be depending upon our nation for water and food and electricity, who will be suffering horribly in the future. Flood risk equals probability of the flood times the consequences. Here you see a picture of Sacramento, California. Yolo County is on the left. Farm fields, valuable agricultural products, and as we increase development in those farm fields, we're going to see more and more potential for damages. The Army Corps of Engineers has pioneered the idea of buying down flood risk, where you start with an initial risk and through insurance and building codes and zonings, levies, this is a core slide, contingency response plans, outreach, and you come up with a lesser residual risk. But, what is really happening in this nation is all the shareholders increasing risk. We start with a small initial risk. We don't have an adequate plan for warning and evacuation. We have upstream development increasing flows. We have lack of awareness, lack of proper insurance, such as difference in conditions insurance. We have critical facilities not protected. We have more and more valuable stuff in harm's way, and we have infrastructure not properly designed and maintained. And we start with a small risk, and we end up with a vastly increased residual risk. And that's even without climate change. Let's talk about disasters. What is a disaster? Well, is it the loss of a job or your home? Sure. Loss of a community facility for an individual, for community? Yeah. Widespread loss of power, an earthquake, a flood, a fire? It's a matter of perspective. We need to look at this from the point of view of the disaster victim or survivor, business, industry, the local community, the state, the national government. We need to look at it from the point of view of a whole community. Now, people often ask me, what's a catastrophic disaster? And there are all sorts of folks that have researched this. I have a methodology, and it works for me. In describing a catastrophic disaster, if all levels of government, the voluntary agencies active in disaster, business and industry, if basically they're functional, nobody perceives whatever happened as a catastrophe. If they're not, it's considered a catastrophe. In areas where business and government, voluntary agencies are already fragile, we're often going to have a catastrophe. So let's think about that. If the economy is fragile, we're possibly heading for a catastrophic disaster. Does anybody think the United States is as economically strong as it was in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, the 80s, 90s, 2000, 2005? How about the economy in the rest of the world? Are we maybe headed towards a truly catastrophic disaster in which the U.S. economy itself will have a hard time recovering? What are the planning implications? What are the societal implications? What are the implications for your family? We don't have to have events being a disaster. Preparedness planning, individual planning, community planning, whole community planning through disaster codes, pre-disaster mitigation planning, post-disaster mitigation planning, mutual assistance, disaster contingency planning, planning to manage volunteers and donations. All of that can help design a system that is not a disaster or a catastrophe. We need to have people thinking that they need to be resilient, even in a major black swan type event, for their employees, their suppliers, their customers. Self-help. We need to have more insurance coverage. We need business continuity plans, shared resources, coordination with the local charities, voluntary agencies, government programs. And there's a lot of folks working on this. U.S. Chamber of Commerce is doing some great stuff. The United Way is doing some fantastic stuff. This Institute for Business and Home Safety, I strongly recommend for those of you that are trying to work on this whole community approach to emergency preparedness. IBHS has this wonderful Open for Business site. FEMA is doing some absolutely incredible stuff. Many of the NOAA organizations are doing stuff. The Red Cross has recently tremendously increased their attention to hazard mitigation and preparedness. Coast Guard's doing some neat stuff. You've got things like the Disaster Resistant Business Council in Tulsa. You've got all sorts of organizations, several in Hawaii, all over the United States. We've got people doing this stuff. But what I am seeing as I look at community plans around the country is there's a huge flaw, and that businesses and often government fail to consider that their most valuable asset is their employees. And they forget that they need to have their employees in place to run their business, to run their government. Very survival of a community, a business, or its management may depend on pre-disaster mitigation, planning, and preparedness. So when we think of sustainability, smart growth, does it have to have a foundation in emergency management and hazard mitigation? Well, there was a wonderful article in the Urban Lawyer, which is one of our nation's most respected legal publications. It was trying to analyze just what is smart growth, what is green infrastructure, what is all that stuff. And so they looked at the writings of the 16 gurus in the movement, 135 separate principles. Not one of them referred to hazards. This was written 2 years after Hurricane Katrina. There's hope, though. There really is hope. We're seeing exciting American Planning Association, American Bar Association awareness and initiatives. FEMA is doing stuff. We have this very exciting and potentially transforming National Hazard Mitigation Collaborative Alliance. FEMA and the National Association of Emergency Managers have formed. We've got the formation of the Natural Hazard Mitigation Association. I had to throw that in. You've got the Army Corps of Engineers Silver Jackets programs. Lots of folks working on sustainability, climate adaptation, and disaster preparedness. Some wonderful and even inspirational publications, presentations, and we finally see the media really catching on to some of the reasons that disasters are increasing. I cannot recommend this publication too highly. Oops, I'm sorry, folks. Got to go back. It is by Don Wilson and Michelle Adams. It is an absolute must-read, and we'll be talking about that in a little bit as well. CNN had a great discussion of the Atlanta flooding, talking about the concrete jungle, talking about how we're changing our pervious surfaces, the places that absorb water, channel it into the ground, and have it instead running off rapidly. We have folks like Dr. Kelly Klima on the call talking about working together for climate change adaptation with the climate change community, the folks that are concerned about carbon sequestration, talking about how we can really develop a resilience to climate variability, climate change. And it's really exciting to have her on the phone and to listen to some of the stuff that she is doing. This wonderful center that she's involved with, the Center for Clean Air Policy, has some great stuff on adaptation. American Planning Association is talking more and more about hazards in terms of where one builds and how one builds. Has a great publication that was funded by FEMA edited by Jim Schwab on hazard mitigation. American Bar Association, it's a 400,000-person organization, is talking now about state-of-the-art building codes, retrofitting, land use policies, tax credits, all involved in loss mitigation so that we can increase our capability with respect to affordable insurance policies. This is really important. This was an unanimous decision of the American Bar Association House of Delegates, typically a somewhat conservative organization, and they are very much in favor of taking a look at support for hazard mitigation. They have voted to join the National Hazard Mitigation Collaborative Alliance. They want to make sure we protect property rights, we recognize the legal issues, recognize the role of state and local government, but that we do hazard mitigation. So, how can we proceed? Well, ignoring the confusion surrounding climate change or ignoring people's fervently held beliefs about the topic, it ain't going to work. Excuse me. We need principled negotiation and outreach to others. We need to deliver our message about safe and sustainable development or no adverse impact to other folks. Many of these folks do not share our beliefs, do not have any real affinity or liking for us, and we need to share it in their lingo about their concerns, their passions, their beliefs, their fears, their vision, things they love. So this training today expands on the work that I've done with David Mallory at negotiation sessions. Many of you have had a chance to see those, especially the Georgia. The next one will be coming up, I believe, in September in Salt Lake City. We talk about negotiations based on principles. We talk about trying to understand the other guy so that we understand where they're coming from. And the principle, and I'm proposing that we use, is that we hope for the best and we plan for the worst. Fundamental principle of emergency management, and can possibly help us get across our ideas to a very skeptical audience. So how can we do this? We're going to have to build bridges and links to friends and allies who are not our friends and allies now, who may have very little knowledge of or have very little particular concern about hazard mitigation or floodplain management. Their thing may be carbon sequestration for climate change. Their thing may be wetland protection. Their thing may be protecting waterfowl or birds. Their thing may be water quality. We need to reach out to those folks, even if they don't like government, civil servants, bureaucrats, or a whole lot more stuff that they'd be happy to tell you how little they like. We need to reach out to people who don't agree with us, so that, we need to understand what they care about, so we can develop a message of safety that they will care about. For they will care about what we have to say. We have to show them that we care about them. How are we going to do it? Discussion, talk, listening, learning, and showing that we care about what concerns them, so that they care about our message of safety. So, here's some stuff that I've seen that works pretty good. Many of the folks who fervently believe that climate change is just plain hooey or a plot against their rights have other very strong beliefs too. Many of them, folks that I've talked to, firmly believe in God, the United States, in helping one's neighbor, the need to protect and love their land. They believe in reducing the role of government in our lives. So how do we get the harm prevention message across to them? Well, one is faith-based messaging, talking about the stewardship of the earth, talking about the idea of do unto others. Remember that do unto others thing? Talk about reducing the cost of disasters to our society to save taxpayer dollars. Talk about protecting the land for future generations. Talking about the need to avoid litigation. Message that works to environmentalists that I've seen is talking about safe and sustainable development, protecting water quality, groundwater, wetlands, naturally beneficial values. Talking about how if we do a proper job with safe and sustainable development, it keeps stuff, bad stuff out of our waterways, helps protect endangered species. Oh yeah, and it avoids litigation. How about the folks that are on the climate change as hazard mitigation. And they're interested in carbon sequestration, interested in cutting back on emission greenhouse gases. Well, until we reverse the changes in climate induced by human emissions, we need to adapt to climate changes. Safe and sustainable development, the principles of no adverse impact can help us with this. Economic pressures and externalization of costs and benefits, in other words, the system we have now, can and will drive development into areas where a scientist may well wish it weren't located. And they may wish to ban construction in such areas. Well, it's got legal issues, and it sure has economic issues. So sending a message of safe construction to higher standards is less likely to be economically unsuccessful or legally challenged. How about for someone that just cares about her community's economy? Well, I'm sorry. This is previous. There we go. Consider how horrible a natural event in your community would be: a wildfire, a hurricane, an earthquake, cascading disaster, like a flood following a wildfire. Considering how the growth and vulnerability of our society is making things worse and worse. Considering future projections, uncertainty. And can we agree to stop making things worse and start making a sustainable future for economics? How about somebody else that cares about the economy? Trying to get them to agree that, gosh, if we didn't learn this before, in the aftermath of Katrina, there is no possibility in the world of a sustainable economy, or for that matter, any economy at all, without safe housing and safe locations for business and industry. And part of that, need to have housing for employees to work in that business and industry. Some locations, particularly Alaska, the Caribbean, Hawaii, and remote locations, you need to have port operations as an especially critical part of the economy. And overall, business and industry has got to be part of the whole community solution in an individual community and throughout their entire chain of supply. As discussions come up, it doesn't necessarily have to be about a local disaster. If somebody's concerned about wildfire, can we weave in a discussion about, gee whiz, a wildfire could totally change the hydrology and hydraulics of the afflicted area, potentially for years and years. Talk about the implications for floods, water quality, economics, whatever they're interested in. Any crisis is a terrible thing to waste if we can lead the discussion around to providing a message of safe development, delivered, focused on what the audience cares about. Droughts. Gee, I'd love to talk to you about droughts. I'm sorry about this, folks. I keep hitting this. Any crisis is a teachable moment. Think about droughts and how droughts can lead to floods. We need to determine what the audience that you're talking to cares about, desires, fears, and loves. We need to reach out to people and know them. Discussion with some of our more conservative friends. Here is something from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. This is rock-ribbed conservative, folks, talking about public policies encouraging risky and inefficient coastal development. Okay. So we need insurance reforms and stronger building codes. Sure, you betcha. In order to address the adverse effects of global warming. When I talk to engineers, I always mention to them, engineers are required by their code, not my codes, their codes, to hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. This is an ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers quote. It has to be applied with equal rigor to all aspects of an engineer's work throughout the world, New Orleans, America, and throughout the world. We at Natural Hazard Mitigation Association get across the idea that the current building and development practices are the antithesis of safety. Do your job. designed for safety? How about for people who just really care about disaster victims? Get the idea across to them that goodness, now this thing, I didn't do anything on this, and it's moving. I'm sorry about that. Get the idea across that as we go forward with proper and safe construction, we're going to have fewer disaster victims. That's a good thing. We can talk about our principles placing the burden of development and redevelopment on those who make the profit and benefit from development. I wish we had a lot more time together to the kind of way we used to do at Georgia Association of Floodplain Managers, to talk about some solutions, to talk about the messaging. We've done a lot of stuff for levees over the years. We've done a lot of stuff on community development. So I'm hoping that you folks will think about developing some messages on your own. And we can talk about that. We will have a little time at the end of this today. We're doing great on time. I want to talk about some resources that I found, some of the new stuff that I hadn't seen before. First of all, of course, there's the patchwork quilt that many of you have seen. I strongly recommend it to you, talking about the funding available for pre- and post-disaster hazard mitigation, harm prevention. There's a lot of other stuff out there. FEMA's risk map products are increasingly excellent, I believe. NOAA, the digital, and many other NOAA sites, Storm Smart Coast products and web information. Now, let me mention that Storm Smart Coast, you might think, well, that's just for coastal. They have a tremendous amount of information that is equally applicable to inland areas. The Center for Clean Air Policy has several websites that just have incredibly good information. And for those of you that really want to follow up on climate change from the point of view, especially of the law and what other communities are doing around the nation, I mean, can go to the Georgetown Climate Center website there. One of the keys for getting people to change their mind about stuff is to show them that so many other people are doing things differently. Patchwork Quilt, I hope many of you have seen. This book I mentioned earlier by Don Watson and Michelle Adams has some fantastic information in it, talking about what causes inland flooding, talking about coastal adaptation. An absolutely outstanding book, and I can't recommend it too strongly. There's a great resource out there online talking about anticipating hazardous weather in your community, really excellently done. You've got the FEMA publication on the whole community approach, which I think is really well worth reading. And things around the country like the climate change and regulatory takings that have come out of Hawaii, very, very thoughtful publication. The National Disaster Recovery Framework is worth a look. Stresses planning throughout it and has a lot in there on hazard mitigation. Presidential Policy Directive by President Obama talks about our nation's preparedness and includes significant planning and hazard mitigation elements, which are most welcome to those of us that are concerned about this. Definitely an opportunity for additional input, and additional input from all of you is very much needed. Fundamentally, cut right to the chase, the bottom line, our society has a choice. We are at a fork in the road. We are either going to choose better standards that protect resources and people, or the standards which we are using today, which will inevitably result in destruction and litigation. And we need to have friends and allies to help us get this message across, so that all of us throughout our society, the whole community, can play a key role in a safe and sustainable future for our nation. Here's some contact information on the Natural Hazard Mitigation Association. Comments, questions, thoughts, ideas, over to you. Sean Roach thought there's no way that I could get this thing done in 40 minutes, and Sean, you were right. I believe I got it done in 32 minutes. Thanks. Over to you.
Ed. I'd like to open it up now if you have any questions. We still have some time for some Q&A, so please speak up and Ed will be happy to address your question.
Ed, do you think the building codes are going to get more stringent as ASFPM works with the ICC?
I hope that they very much do. I mean, let me give you one specific example. I don't know how many of you have had an opportunity to listen to the incredible YouTube video about Terry Turner's closing presentation last year at the Hazard Mitigation Practitioners Workshop that was held in Broomfield, Colorado. It was talking about safe rooms and Joplin tornado and all that, and the need for safe rooms to be included in our building codes for places of where we're going to have large groups of folks. I hope we can significantly strengthen the building codes. There's a great article, or actually a white paper that came out from the Wharton School that basically indicates, if I read it correctly, that if we had 4 feet of freeboard along the coast, if we were requiring that in the building codes, that we might actually be able to have a situation where a private enterprise could take over the management of the issuance of flood policies and even the hurricane-prone Texas coast. I believe we need tremendously strong building codes to take into account the reality of climate variability, the reality of sea level rise. I was honored to work for Governor Romney of Massachusetts on an effort for climate change adaptation with Rebecca Haney and others, Rebecca who's on the phone, that led to a requirement in the Massachusetts State Building Code for a 2-foot freeboard along the coast. So I think we need to strengthen our building codes, and I think we can, and we should. Other questions?
Ed, you mentioned, referred to FEMA and some of the good work they're doing a number of times. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to the role of private insurance in disaster mitigation.
I think that one of the most significant changes that we can make, and I had to cut this out of the slide presentation, FEMA has an excellent publication called America Burning Recommissioned Roman II. And it talks about how we as a society changed the risk and the consequences of urban fires in our nation over the last 100 years. This was not a quick fix. Over the last 100 years, we changed from being one of the most worst nations in the world in terms of dealing with urban fires to one of the better nations. And we did it in a complex way that, to a large extent, in my opinion, was driven by insurance risk rating with individuals, communities in competition with each other, not to build in the least safe way, but rather in the best possible way so that they could get extra points on their rating that is issued on fire risk by the Insurance Services Organization, the same folks that do the risk rating on the really excellent FEMA program of community rating. So I think insurance can help drive the economic engine to solve the problem that we're in. I strongly think that private market insurance can tremendously be helpful to our national efforts there.
Other questions or comments?
Gee whiz, folks.
Ed, do you think that FEMA would ever get rid of the NFIP program, or do you think the NFIP program might be wrapped up into, say, into the codes, ICC codes, if, the way they keep saying drop the regulating?
I think that's an incredibly good question. I think that there's always going to be a need for a national flood insurance program of some kind or nature. And I think we've got to recognize that it is the real important part of the flood insurance program is what is done at the state and local level, primarily the local level, in terms of zoning and land use authority. Certainly the codes can be strengthened, but the zoning and land use authority, the local stuff, is always going to be required. I think that in terms of, I'm talking years and years from now, it's possible that we could slide over to a system of catastrophic disaster insurance where we actually have communities aggressively competing with each other to do things with stronger codes, more excellent codes, so that they can get a better risk rate. But I think we're probably, for the foreseeable future, always going to see something that resembles the National Flood Insurance Program at the local level.
Hopefully they do it sooner.
That's good news for me.
Other questions? Comments?
One credential.
Sean, I believe we said that, or Sean or Nathan, I think we said we were going to record this so that folks can go back and listen to it again, or can spread the word on it.
Yes, we will have that recording available, and we'll shoot out some information on where that's going to be stored and how it can be accessed as a follow-up to this call.
Okay, great.
Ed, this is Callie Klima. I wanted to thank you for the wonderful shout-outs today. I was just wondering if you have any comments on the National Academy of Sciences report that came out recently.
Which report's that? I just saw one this morning.
I believe the Disaster Resilient Communities one.
Yes, I just saw that. I think it's an excellent report, of course. Some great folks involved in it. I think that it takes a very high-level federal look, and I am hoping very much that we can work increasingly closely with local governments, local decision makers, the mayors, the city managers, the developers who are actually making the decisions that are making things, frankly, worse every day around the country. That's where we need to change. Certainly we need to have better federal policies, but we certainly also need to have a system that rewards the good conduct that some people are doing around the country. And I'd like to see a whole lot more discussion about how we can get to that, and I think the American Bar Association has some very, very good ideas that I would like to pursue in terms of economic incentives. Anything else?
Ed, great presentation. I'm wondering if you're hearing any rumblings on very large-scale work on this, on both flooding and drought. We seem to spend a lot of time with the kind of smaller iterations, but the very large-scale changes that cover more than one watershed are kind of hard to push. Are you hearing anything out there on that level?
Yeah, great question. I am not. I think that the whole topic seems somewhat toxic. I mean, the whole any number of observers have noted that the entire topic of climate change is generally absent from the presidential election. The solutions, the hard solutions to go forward to a developer and say, yes, we want your development, we want it desperately, but we want it done in a safe and proper way, which, by the way, is going to be, well, it's actually, frankly, it might be more costly. I'm not seeing other people picking up on what I've seen in terms of the wonderful brochure from the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District that talks about win-win solutions, working with developers to show them how to do things that are safer, that pull development back from the floodplain and actually end up with development that is more attractive for the consumer, easier to sell, costs less to develop in terms of the actual work out on the ground, and actually results in a more valuable product. I think we need to pursue those win-win solutions so that we're talking about money, talking about how to reach out to the developers and the city managers. I was at the American Bar Association meeting this past weekend and earlier this week in Chicago, and we're talking with folks that are out on the ground, the managers, the mayors, the local attorneys, and local governments are going bankrupt. It's hard to get the attention of cash-starved local governments talking about hazard mitigation. We need to reach out to them and show them how we can do things better and differently in a way that is going to work for them. And it is very difficult, but it is doable. Great question.
By the way, I'm going to send you a study that we did after Hurricane Andrew that was covered about 2,400 square miles of the southeast coast of Florida, and was kind of a systems approach to how you looked at sea level rise as well as flooding and drought.
Great. Look forward to it. Yeah, that would be super. Who was speaking, please?
Dan Williams.
Hey, Dan. Hi.
Seattle.
I think we're going to have to, we're at about out of time, so we're going to have to cut off questions there, but thanks for your participation. Ed, can you see my slide up now?
I do not. What do I have to do?
If you stop sharing, hit the green tab at the top.
Yeah, I'm hitting it. Sorry. Return. How's that?
Well, there should be a slide up now showing our next two sessions. One, November 7th. The title is Better Basic or NAI Enhanced Local Community Examples. The presenter we've tentatively lined up is Kevin Burke with the Atlanta Beltline Project. And then in March, we have some recognizable names here. Larry Larson and Doug Placencia will be presenting on NAI, lessons, trends, and opportunities. So thanks for joining. That's what's on the slate coming down the road. We're always open to new ideas, topics, or presenters. So if you have an NAI-related topic or best practice or lessons learned that you'd like to share, feel free to email me at sroche, R-O-C-H-E, at mbakercorp.com. We're about out of time for any follow-up on the roll call, so you should have gotten an email this morning with the PDF of Ed's presentation. If you were not able to announce yourself on the roll call at the beginning of the call, if you just want to reply to that message and let us know whether you're a CFM and that you attended, we will add your name to the list that we submit to ASFPM for continuing education credits. Thanks again for dialing in, and we'll see you in 3 months.
Thanks much. Well done.
Thank you, Ed. It was very good.